Thank you. Seamlessly we resume and we move on to the next item of business. A statement by Kate Forbes on the budget update. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, so there will be no interventions or interruptions. I call on Kate Forbes, Cabinet Secretary,
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I just apologise at the outset for the late advanced sharing of the statement with the opposition members, but I still have great confidence in them still being able to ask intelligent questions. Presiding Officer, I welcome this opportunity to provide a further update on the budget. This continues my commitment to engage Parliament on funding provided to support the COVID-19 response following the unprecedented summer budget revision and the autumn budget revision. And I'll also take the opportunity to outline further support for businesses which will be available in January for hard-pressed companies across a range of sectors. Since the autumn budget revision, consequential support provided now stands at £8.2 billion. We have drawn down and allocated this funding over the course of the year in response to what has been an exceptional and dynamic set of circumstances. In budget revisions so far, over £6 billion of funding was formally allocated, the largest elements being provided to health and business, reflecting the fact that COVID-19 most directly impacts health and the economy. In line with a letter I sent to the Finance and Constitution Committee yesterday, I can confirm that we now expect to allocate the remaining £2.2 billion. I must remind Parliament that this, of course, remains a snapshot of a dynamic funding position, with formal allocations planned to be set out in February in the spring budget revision. The expected allocations, taking account of announcements made so far this year, as well as expected requirements to the end of the year, are as follows. Around £600 million for health and social care, wider public health initiatives and welfare support. That includes vaccinations, test and trace, and the £500 bonus for health and social care workers, plus the winter plan for social protection, which helps people to pay for food, heating, warm clothing and shelter. Secondly, support for business and the wider economy, totalling £570 million, including funding for the strategic framework, local business support packages, the newly self-employed hardship funds and the local authority discretionary business funding. It also includes a new targeted business support package that I am announcing today. An estimated £139 million of previously announced funding for local government, bringing the overall support package to councils to more than £1 billion. And lastly, but not least, around £500 million to support transport services, as well as to cover pandemic-related income shortfalls within organisations such as Police Scotland, the Scottish Funding Council and the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Services. That leaves just over £300 million of COVID-19 resource consequentials formally unallocated. The nature of the COVID-19 outbreak and the potential asks for further demand-led spend means it's crucial that this funding is held as contingency. We must also consider any further funding requirements relating to the end of the EU transition period on the 31st of December, with costs wholly dependent on the final deal negotiated by the UK Government. Allocating this funding as contingency is consistent with the terms of the funding guarantee provided by Treasury to the devolved governments, which specified the funding was to cover the period until March 2021. And of course, with our limited borrowing powers, we do not have flexibility to increase spend and therefore must manage demand-led expenditure risks within the consequentials provided. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government remains focused on responding concurrently to the public health emergency and the economic emergency caused by the virus. Many businesses affected by pandemic restrictions have been able to access Scottish Government support grants, totalling more than £2.3 billion, including the Strategic Framework Business Fund's 4 weekly payments, the £15 million second phase of the newly self-employed hardship fund and the £30 million local authority discretionary fund. I know that businesses need and want more support, and we will continue to review and refine our COVID support offer within available resources. And so today, I'm pleased to confirm an allocation of £185 million for new and additional business support in the new year, providing support on a sector-by-sector basis so that it is appropriately targeted. We listen and have listened to the voice of business. We are developing with a range of partners, including local authorities, grant schemes for hospitality, for the event sector, live music and cultural venues, for the arts, indoor football centres and for support to our food and drink sector, including 1.8 million for brewers. We'll be supporting recovery plans developed in partnership with the construction sector and with the tourism sector, including self-catering, B&Bs and guest houses. Doing this on a sector-by-sector basis can add complexity, but it also ensures that we tailor the support so that it is as effective as possible. The finer detail of each of these schemes will be provided soon, including how to apply in January. But today I want to highlight a few examples of the types of businesses that we will support. I'm pleased to say that we will give £1.5 million to travelling show people ineligible for other support. And I want to pay tribute to Richard Lyle in particular for his advocacy and representation of that sector. We've allocated £15 million for the wedding sector and supply chain, including wedding photographers. And we will be seeking to ensure that those who have had little or no support since March are targeted. I'm pleased to say that in developing this approach, we've been working closely with a newly established group formed in the last few weeks to lobby for and represent that important and diverse sector and its supply chain. That collaboration will continue, and it's typical of the way we work with a range of business bodies to understand and to shape the support that best meets the needs of their members within the available resources. They are our trusted partners. There's also £5 million for travel agents, £1.5 million for visitor attractions, and almost £6 million for coach companies and tour operators. We will help support taxi drivers' fixed costs with a new £19 million fund and a one-off grant which builds on the support already available. And we will similarly support mobile close contact services like hairdressers with one-off grants from a £15 million budget. Tourism is one of the hardest hit sectors, and I can announce that further support of over £60 million will be provided. The details of that package of support is being developed in consultation with the industry, and the full details will be announced by Fergus Ewing. Today's announcement will help local authorities to begin to make their individual decisions about how they will use the £30 million discretionary fund that I referenced earlier, taking account of the sectors that we are supporting and making considered local determinations on where to target their new resources. The distribution of the discretionary fund will be a decision for each local authority. That is the whole purpose of it. We have allocated the money, agreed high-level guidance, and it's now over to local authority leaders to determine how to spend it on local needs. I'm grateful to local authorities across the country who have been working with us as key design and delivery partners with a shared determination to do all that we can to support businesses, jobs and communities. Before I conclude, I want to make one further comment. The first month of any new year is always challenging for the hospitality sector. Demand tends to be low following the festive season. And recognising that, additional one-off payments will be available to the hospitality businesses that have played such a significant role in the fight against the virus and who have been impacted so severely. These will be £2,000 grants or £3,000 grants based on rateable values. And that support, valued at £30 million, will also extend to our hotels and will be on top of any payment due in January as part of the Strategic Framework Business Fund, recognising the challenges that many are facing at this time. And so, Presiding Officer, budget revisions to date, as well as today's statement, illustrate my continued transparent engagement with Parliament regarding our fiscal response to COVID-19. Within our available budgetary envelope, we've looked to mitigate the impact of COVID as far as possible and have had to provide support based on need in Scotland in areas such as health and wider public health initiatives, welfare support and continued provision of transport and the economy. And today we continue to illustrate that support for the economy and for our hard-hit businesses, with further support of £185 million across impacted sectors. A statement like this isn't the place to get into minute detail on each of the funds available, but I'd encourage businesses to keep an eye on the Scottish Government's website, findbusinesssupport.gov.scot, for details in the coming days and in January in particular. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised. I'll intend to allow 20 minutes for questions, and members please press the request to speak buttons if they wish to ask a question. I call first Murdo Fraser, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by thanking the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of the statement, albeit rather shorter timescale from what we are used to, but nevertheless we did receive it. And can I thank her for the statement? We have seen, of course, an unprecedented sum of an additional £8.2 billion guaranteed by the UK Treasury to support public services, businesses and individuals in Scotland impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. That money does no one any good sitting in the Scottish Government's bank accounts. We have consistently been calling for that money to be paid out and calling for an accounting, and I welcome the breakdown, therefore, we've had today and the commitments that have been made, specifically the £50 million for the wedding sector that we've called for, money for travel, for the tourist sector, for taxi companies and all the other initiatives. I wonder if I can ask three specific questions in relation to what's announced today. Firstly, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that the tourism money will be available to support the providers of self-catering holiday accommodation? I noticed she said that details would be announced in due course by Fergus Ewing. When can we expect that announcement to be made? Because many people are waiting for confirmation of when these funds might be available. Secondly, there's reference made to the £30 million discretionary fund for local councils. I know local councils have been waiting now for 3 weeks to get details of how this fund will operate. And I would like to ask, therefore, how much discretion will councils have about how that money is allocated? So, for example, if it's a council where tourism is a major part of the local economy, will they be able to allocate funds to tourism, notwithstanding that there is a dedicated sum for tourism already accounted for?
And please answer your question quickly, please. And thirdly,
Deputy Presiding Officer, we have seen over the past few days very welcome commitments from large retailers such as Tesco's and Morrisons to hand back some of the non-domestic rate refunds they've received this year. A good example of responsible capitalism. Does the Cabinet Secretary have a figure for the amount of money expected to be recouped, and has that money as yet been allocated?
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you for those series of questions. I'll answer them as quickly as I can. In terms of the tourism money, our approach to date has always been to design those schemes in partnership with the individual sectors. So, for example, the Hotel Recovery Group was done in conjunction with the SDA and others, and with self-catering it was done in conjunction with the Association of Scottish Self-Caterers, and that's the approach that we intend to take. And yes, I did reference self-catering because the intention is to provide funding to self-catering as part of the money announced. In terms of the discretionary fund, one of the reasons for making the announcement today is to give councils an indication of where we will provide sector-based support so they can use their discretionary funds for other purposes. It does need to be targeted to their local areas. So, for example, business need on the Isle of Skye is going to be different to business need in the middle of Glasgow, and that's where we want to allow maximum discretion. The last 3 weeks have included agreeing internally within COSLA how they want to distribute it, and then agreeing the general guidance, which is as high level as possible. In terms of the non-domestic rates relief funding returned to us, I wrote to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury today seeking urgent clarity, because if those funds are to be collected centrally by Treasury, we need clarity on how it will then be redistributed to the devolved government. So there has been a lot of calls with Treasury in the last few days to understand not all devolved governments can actually receive the money, and essentially this is a donation, and donations are not normally made to governments. So there is some clarity required on how those refunds are made. But of course, as I've done in the past and will do again, I'd encourage anybody that's been in a similarly resilient position to Tesco and other supermarkets to consider whether they can contribute to that fund.
Jackie Bailey.
A month ago, Scottish Labour demanded additional resource for the hospitality and tourism sector. Last week, we asked for support for small businesses. So I'm pleased that the Scottish Government has now acted. Many businesses, though, have received no help from the Coronavirus Restriction Fund or the Hardship Fund, and no support from the Strategic Framework Business Fund because the criteria are too tight. Most supply chain businesses have been excluded, and those without premises have been excluded too. So I welcome the flexibility on criteria. Can the Cabinet Secretary, though, tell me how much has been spent on these funds so far? Can she also tell me why businesses are having to wait until January to get support when many of them are struggling now and going to the wall now? And does she believe that this will be enough to help businesses to survive?
Cabinet Secretary.
Can I start with that last question first? Because I recognise, and I've said this repeatedly, that these funds and these grants will never replace 100% of lost income. And therefore, the challenge just now is to try and get the economy back open and running and trading by suppressing the virus. And that is our objective. In terms of the calls, I think members across the chamber have made calls on additional support for business. So I'm pleased to hear Labour welcoming the announcement today. In terms of the funds that have been paid, local authorities are working almost night and day to get those funds out to businesses that need it. In terms of the funding I've announced, that is over and above the strategic framework of recurring grants, and some of the announcements have already started to be made. So she talked about supply chains, and she may have seen on Friday the announcement of additional support specifically for wholesalers, where they can apply for specific support where their income has been reduced. In terms of the other funds, those funds will be available as quickly as possible. We intend, and there's been many calls to replicate what Wales is doing in terms of the Welsh Government. They too are making most of their funding available in January. So it allows for the strategic framework businesses to receive the funding from local authorities, whilst we ensure that any additional designing that needs to go into these schemes in conjunction with business organisations can happen, and the schemes are ready to go. And of course, in terms of hospitality, January is well known as one of the hardest months for hospitality.
I have 12 members wishing to ask questions, so you have to be succinct because this must finish at 3:20. I call Patrick Harvey to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On the 18th of November, Parliament voted for a motion calling on the Government to deliver funding for the purpose of recruiting at least an additional 2,000 full-time teachers. Given the additional workload on teachers, this is clearly urgent. The Cabinet Secretary's statement didn't include that funding. Does this mean that the decision has been taken not to comply with the will of Parliament in this regard, or will an announcement be imminent, providing the funding that has been clearly called for?
I'm not sure if that's a question for you, Cabinet Secretary, but it's up to you.
Well, I'm happy to answer insofar as I see the Deputy First Minister sitting next to me, who is, I believe, taking part in a debate next. In terms of funding, the funding breakdown that I have provided to date includes funding not just for businesses, but in terms of the letter that was sent to the Finance Committee yesterday, it also includes funding for other areas. Additional funding has already been made available to education to try and deal with the additional challenges that they face.
Willie Rennie, followed by Stuart McMillan.
We've worked constructively with the Finance Secretary on additional support for businesses, and I'm glad that she has listened to many of the specific pleas, including on travel agencies, self-catering, but also on taxi companies as well. What's not so clear is what the real value is per business. I know she's probably not going to go into the fine detail of this, but a rough estimate as to how much each business would expect to receive. And as many of these businesses are already on their knees, can she kind of guarantee or give some kind of commitment that this money will get out the door pretty quickly?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, on that last point, I can confirm that we will get that money out as quickly as is humanly possible to try and provide that support. And as I said in my statement, one of the challenges with doing it on a sectoral basis is that it is more complex, but it does allow us to use every penny on the hardest hit businesses rather than seeing any funding used in ways that aren't necessary right now. Willie Rennie talked about travel agents, and that's part of a general fund to coach operators, brewers, visitor attractions, visitor accommodation, hostels and indoor football. That will be distributed by local authorities, and we'll be looking at grants. We'll be determining what the grant amount is, but it would probably be in the region of a £10,000 grant to those businesses in need.
Stuart McMillan, followed by Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the Finance Secretary consider additional resources for communities who have been hit the hardest by COVID-19 to help them and also their local economies get back to a trading position that is more recognisable?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, throughout the pandemic, we have tried to take decisions based on assessment not only of the public health issues presented by COVID-19, but also judgments around the social and the economic harms as well. And that's reflected in a number of our interventions so far, including packages of support for business and welfare. And I think one of the first announcements that we made as soon as a case of COVID was found was the £350 million for welfare support through local authorities. And so I can assure Stuart McMillan that I will take that line of thinking into the budget, including in my dialogue with partners in local government. There are a range of uncertainties, challenges and financial constraints that will impact on the budget, but we will do all that we can to help businesses through these exceptional difficult times and try and provide as much support as we can. Of course, if any member, including Stuart McMillan, has specific ideas that they want me to consider, then I'm always happy to talk to him or meet with him.
Maurice Golden, followed by Bruce Crawford.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Support for the wedding sector, supply chain and taxi drivers is welcome, but many of those businesses will have been facing severe restrictions since October the 9th and are on their knees struggling to survive. Will the Cabinet Secretary confirm that new support schemes will be backdated to the beginning of the autumn?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, in terms of that date, obviously the funding that I've announced today is built on the basis of additional financial consequentials that came from the UK Government. Those were only announced in the first week of November. But in terms of our design of the schemes, I said in my statement that I want to design those schemes, and work has already started, we're halfway through, with the business organisations that are most impacted. And the wedding sector is a good example, where there is a group that represents the different interests in the wedding sector, and they will ensure that funding goes to those that need it. For example, there will be some hotels that have already received funding. There will be other representative businesses that have received funding through other schemes. So it's important that the funding goes to the businesses most impacted, and we'll design that with the businesses themselves.
Bruce Crawford, followed by Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, I'm very pleased to announce an enhanced financial support package today, particularly as tourism and hospitality sectors of such huge importance in my constituency. But is the Cabinet Secretary aware that I've been pushing the Scottish Government to announce what additional support will be forthcoming for spectator sports to help them survive the winter period? So when will the Scottish Government announce such support? Because some smaller clubs, in the SPFL in particular, the situation is critical.
Cabinet Secretary.
I recognise that Bruce Crawford has been representing those sports clubs and making the case for additional funding for them, and I recognise the impact that that COVID has had on the sports sector in particular, particularly those clubs and parts of sport that rely on spectator income. So we have developed a support package for Scottish spectator sports, and the Minister for Public Health, Joe Fitzpatrick, will set out the detail of that in Parliament tomorrow.
Sarah Boyack, followed by John Mason.
Does the £600 million for health and social care include funding for council-provided social care? And what certainty can the Cabinet Secretary offer for the unallocated funding she's mentioned, given councils are already having to access reserves and plan for cuts in jobs and services? Edinburgh alone has a £60 million financial shortfall, Cabinet Secretary.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks. In terms of the health and welfare funds, that includes, as I've already set out, vaccinations, the bonus, the winter social plan, free school meals, self-isolation payments and so on. Quite separately, I've also confirmed additional funding for local government that was previously announced but is now here because it hasn't been included in budget revisions to date. But we will consider any additional needs for local government. As I said, that contingency fund is to meet needs that are currently uncertain but will probably fall in the new year, and I'm prepared to use that funding for all eventualities.
John Mason, followed by Mark MacDonald.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary assure us that she will take a cautious approach and she will not spend money in December or January, which we might need in February or March?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, quite simply because there's no guarantees that we will get additional funding from the UK Government, and I cannot by law overspend my budget. I have to be sure that if there are emergencies, there are crises, there are unknown impacts on our society and our economy from Brexit and other things, that there is funding available. And so that is why I have very transparently allocated £332 million in contingency funding for that purpose.
Mark MacDonald, followed by Alexander Burnett.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that businesses in Aberdeen pay a higher business rate value than businesses of equivalent size in many other local authorities due to historic economic conditions, which perhaps do not currently exist. However, this means that a number of businesses have missed out on business support due to the nationally applied thresholds. When she looks at local delivery, will she also look at local flexibility around rateable values to ensure that businesses in my constituency are not left missing out on support?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Mark MacDonald raises a very important point that local economies differ across the country, and that's why the discretionary funding is so important, that central government will try and target support at the sectors that are hardest hit, but it's important that local authorities have the ability to tailor their own schemes in response to the economic conditions, and that's why I hope that Aberdeen City Council will be able to use the discretionary funding for the particular challenges in Aberdeen City. But in terms of the tourism package, one of the things that I know is being worked on right now is providing support to those bigger businesses that perhaps missed out on original support because they were over £51,000 in rateable value. So there's a particular consideration for those larger businesses.
Alexander Burnett, followed by Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I note my register of interest. Now, given the additional payroll and accounting issues over the festive period and the fact that January may be too late for many businesses, will the Finance Secretary set a date by which the cash promised today will reach businesses?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, in terms of the cash promised today, there's a variety of deadlines for that because there's a variety of schemes. So as I already said, there are some schemes that have opened in December, for example, the wholesaler scheme, which opened last Friday, and there's others, for example, in terms of the grants to show people that will also open earlier. So our intention is to get the money out as quickly as possible. Obviously, the recurring grants will continue for as long as businesses need them. So those will continue to be paid every 4 weeks to businesses in need.
Gillian Martin, followed by James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to thank the Cabinet Secretary for listening to the sectors that we've all worked so hard to advocate for. Government has enabled 100% rates relief to the particularly affected sectors of retail, hospitality and leisure. However, there are other businesses with premises that are struggling but aren't eligible. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she's considered expanding rates relief? I appreciate and I listened to what she said in response to Mark MacDonald on this.
Cabinet Secretary.
I've been very clear publicly that in terms of next year's budget, I am very keen to extend some form of rates relief, but that it's subject to an equivalent policy in England that then generates consequential funding, because it isn't affordable within the Scottish Government's fixed budget to do that. So our desire is to urgently set out a plan to support businesses through non-domestic rates, but it does require early notice from the UK Government of what their intentions are.
James Kelly, followed by James Dornan. You're muted, Mr. Kelly.
Forecasting youth. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. IPPR forecast that youth unemployment could rise to 140,000. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what portion of the 570 million business support monies will be available to cities like Glasgow, where many sadly face the prospect of being blighted by youth unemployment?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for that question. I think he again makes a very, very good point, similar to the one that was raised by Mark MacDonald, about the fact that different parts of this country will be hit in different ways. They've got a different dependence on different sectors, and that's why some form of discretionary funding is so important. Now, of course, Glasgow will get its fair share of all the schemes that have been announced today, and there will be more sectors represented in Glasgow than there will be in some other parts of the country. So they will get a fair share, but over and above that, they will also get their share of the discretionary fund, which has been agreed with COSLA. My understanding is that there's an additional top-up for those areas that have been in level 4, which would include Glasgow.
James Dornan.
Officer, whilst the Chancellor of the Exchequer was announcing a £27 billion increase in UK capital expenditure, he was cutting the Scottish Government's capital budget by 5%. Could the Cabinet Secretary tell me what impact will this have on Scotland's need for an infrastructure-led economy recovery to deliver new jobs and speed up the transition to net zero?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as James Dornan says, that when this Chancellor set out his spending review, it was accompanied by figures from the OBR that demonstrated just how hard hit the economy is going to be, both in terms of unemployment as well as GDP. And it's so important that we invest in infrastructure to try and support economic recovery. And that's why it's deeply unfortunate that as we go into next year's budget and start setting our budget, that the Scottish Government's capital budget is being cut by 5%. Now, I will set out alongside our budget our capital spending review, which doesn't just give a one-year outlook on what our spending will be, but will give a 5-year outlook so that there is that pipeline of work which can give confidence to the construction sector and hopefully ensure a faster economic recovery.
Thank you. That concludes questions on the budget update. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for swift answers, and to members, we got through all the questions. Thank you very much. There will be a short pause till we move on to the next item of business.